My name is David Fleming and I am in the Department of History in the University of Limerick. And I want to use the next 15 to 20 minutes or so to think about the importance of history today, and in particular the importance of local history. So right around the world, statues to once revered figures are falling to the ground in response to present-day social and political anger at the treatment of minorities and other subdued people. Much of this activity is happening in the US, in the United States, where the legacy of slavery still very much reverberates. Because statues and monuments are symbols, they are pretty easy targets for those who wish to make a statement. For some, these statues are symbolic of a proud history. For others, they are reminders of a subjugated past, and hence the reason for their being targeted, and so easily targeted. What strikes me is the importance of the study of history, now more than ever. The only way to properly understand this phenomenon is by studying the histories of these places and these people whose lives were celebrated and those who were oppressed. That's the only way we will fully understand this current day phenomenon. I think it will reveal a very complex and messy set of circumstances, just as life is today. We've not seen much of this activity in Ireland in recent months, partly because we have already experienced it in the 20th century, when symbols of monarchy and imperialism came to a crushing end. In the case of Nelson's column, seen here on the left in 1966, when it was blown up, or in the case of the unceremonious removal of Queen Victoria from the lawn in the front of Leinster House 2 decades earlier in the 1930s. Yet, in the last few years, we sometimes have witnessed monuments, particularly associated with the British Army, become targets. And these are relatively two examples, one from Ennis, where the memorial to Clare people who were involved in the war was smashed, and the other at the War Memorial in Island Bridge, which had graffiti written on it. Yet, in many other places, these monuments continued to be undisturbed and perhaps even unnoticed. Why? Because attitudes and beliefs differ from one locality to the next. And this is really the second point I would like to make. Ireland is and was a patchwork of diverse areas, different regions and localities, where some ideas and notions were taken up, such as the removal of statues, while in others they were ignored and the statues and monuments remain. Histories of Ireland have often tended to generalize and produce a national experience at the expense of this diversity. That is why the study of local history is so important. That's at least what I think. It is important to capture these differences or similarities with what was going on elsewhere. And that is the only way that we will fully be able to appreciate our own localities, but also the different histories that this island had. And I like to give you a few examples of how diverse this experience, this Irish experience, has been. So on the left you see a map of Ireland and how land is used and whether land can be used. So if you look at the green areas, you will see that this land in Leinster and in Munster is highly usable for agriculture and husbandry. But if you look at West Cork, South Kerry, Connemara, Galway, Donegal, other parts of Ulster, you can see that the land is not very usable. It has a very extremely limited use and is very limited. And these are the places where you find hills, stony ground, up in Clare there with the Burren, not very good for agriculture or husbandry. And this has an impact on the nature of localities, on the types of localities that are produced. And it creates this, helps to create, is one factor in creating the diversity of experience in the past in Ireland. And it partly explains, is one factor why, for example, the famine the famine of 1845 to 51 was particularly severe in these parts of the country. Have a look there at West Cork and South Kerry, where you see it was particularly intensive, particularly severe in 1847, County Clare likewise, and a good portion of Connacht. These are the poorer parts agriculturally. These are the poorer parts of the country, and these are hit disproportionately. And so the history of the famine is not necessarily an Irish history. It is a history of localities. The famine has a different impact, and therefore those histories in those places will be quite different from the experience in parts of Tipperary, in counties Meath and Down and Antrim. Their experience is a lot different. Likewise, the Ulster plantation of the 17th century created a unique set of social and economic and political circumstances that set it apart from places like Munster. But if you look closely again at this map, and you'll see where the red shows the percentage of English and Scots settlers after the 17th century, you'll see Dublin highlighted. You'll see parts of Wicklow and parts of Cork highlighted in this same regard. Do these places share similar experiences that the north of Ireland experienced? Well, that's what the study of local history is, and that is why it is not so good to generalize so much. Only by understanding these particular local histories do we get a better understanding of the country as a whole. Similarly, to even demonstrate this diversity at a very local level, a bad relationship on a single estate between a landlord and his tenants in one part of a county, or indeed in one part of the parish, might contrast with a very good relationship in a neighbouring estate, and separated perhaps only by a ditch or a stream. So you could have, in a single parish, two very different experiences in the 18th and 19th centuries in dealing with that landlord-tenant relationship. And these are the types of questions, these are the types of issues that we look at in two programs in the University of Limerick. The first is the Certificate in Local History, which I will come to shortly, and the second is the Master of Arts in Local History, both of which are designed to examine local history in some detail. So the Certificate in Local History is operated in the Irish Workhouse Centre at Portumna in County Galway. It's designed for people who may not have done history before, may have simply studied it a long, long time ago, or not studied it at all as part of the Leaving Cert, or not. It's a basic one-year certificate course taken in the evenings in the Workhouse Centre in Portumna. And this is a real splendid opportunity for people to get a sense of a real 19th century building where inmates were housed and slept and worked and died and survived, some of them. And so classes are held in this building. So it's a very evocative space. It's a one-year program. It's taken in the evenings, usually on Wednesday evenings between 6:30 and 9:30. The other program that I'd like to introduce you to is the MA in Local History. The MA in Local History is, again, it's a part-time program. It's taken over 2 years in the evening, and it is run in cooperation and in association with Mary Immaculate College. So the two institutions take students for one part of the year. In the first year, students take classes on all sorts of things, from oral history to sources for history to topics in Irish history. And so we spend the first year doing that, and in the second year we focus on our own research. So students focus on their particular research in the second year with the help of a supervisor and under the guidance of a supervisor. And in some respects, this is wonderful because we are making connections with the past, but it's also for making connections with like-minded people in the present. Because the most important thing about learning, and particularly coming back to learning, is making friendships with your classmates while exploring this wonderful past, the good and the bad aspects of Ireland's past and the good and the bad aspects of localities and regions together in a friendly environment. And that's what these programs are all about. And before we come to some questions, these are some important contacts if you'd like to contact me. My email is david.fleming@ul.ie, and these are some links if you want to jot them down to the Certificate in Local History and to the MA in Local History. Essentially, if you Google any of these and put them in, you'll get the relevant websites. So thank you very much for listening.